Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to deal with the concept called verb. Verb is a part of speech in English. And how would you define a verb? Looking at the definition of a verb, we can say that a verb is a word that expresses an action, a state of being, or something that acts as a helping unit or as a helper. So verbs that show the state of action are called action verbs. Verbs that show state of being are called linking verbs, and verbs that help either an action verb or a linking verb are called helping verbs or auxiliary verbs. So I'll explain that using an example. Look at this first sentence. I went to Delhi. In this sentence, went is the verb. And why is it a verb? Because it denotes an action, the state of going somewhere, right? Went in the past tense. In the second sentence, I am happy, we see that am is the verb here. Here, it is a state of being. You're showing how you are, your state of being happy. So this is a linking verb. And in the third sentence, you have I will write a story. So in this sentence, you have two verbs, right? So you have will and also write. Write is the main verb and will is a helping verb. That means will helps to convey the action of writing. So this is something that shows about the future. I will write a story. So action verbs and linking verbs can be called main verbs, right? And verbs can be therefore classified as main verbs, linking verbs, and also helping verbs. The other word for helping verbs are called auxiliary verbs. So we'll deal with auxiliary verbs. What are auxiliary verbs? So we will explain what auxiliary verbs are. We will look at what auxiliary verbs are. Now, there are three verbs in English which function both as auxiliary verbs and also as main verbs, right? And because they function both as auxiliary verbs and main verbs, they are called primary auxiliaries. And they are be, have, do. We have different forms of be, right? We have is, was, were, are, etc., right? So, look at these sentences. I've given 6 sentences here. In these sentences, we understand that these three verbs, be, have, and do, show both qualities. They show themselves as main verbs. They also show themselves as auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. Look at the first sentence. I am happy. In the sentence, I am happy, am or the form of be is a main verb. In the second sentence, I am writing a letter. Am is an auxiliary verb. Why is it an auxiliary verb? Because it is helping this main verb writing, right? It shows you the tense. I am writing shows you that it is being done in the present continuous tense. And in this particular example, I have a red car. Have functions as the main verb. There's no other verb there. Have is the main verb. But in the second sentence here, I have done my homework. Have functions as an auxiliary verb. Why is it an auxiliary verb? Because it is used here to help this word done, right? So it shows us the present perfect tense. And here in these examples of do, look at the first one. Please do the work neatly. In this sentence, do functions as the main verb. There is no other verb in this sentence. Whereas in the second sentence with respect to the verb do, look at this. Do you eat meat? Right? Here, do is used to ask a question and it is used to support this main verb eat, right? So this is an interrogative sentence or a sentence that's asking a question. So these are called primary auxiliaries. Be, have, and do. There are only 3 primary auxiliaries in English and they are be, have, and do. That means these 3 verbs can act both as a main verb and also as a helping verb. There is no other verb in English which functions like this. So when somebody asks you what is a primary auxiliary, you just have to tell them that primary auxiliaries are those verbs which act both as a main verb and also as an auxiliary or a helping verb. And there are only 3 primary verbs in English, 3 primary auxiliaries in English. They are be, have, and do. Now, other than primary auxiliaries, we have something called modal auxiliaries, and they're also called modals. Now, what are modals? Now, modals are also called modal verbs, modal auxiliary verbs, or modal auxiliaries, and they are special verbs which behave a little bit irregularly in English. They are different from the normal verbs or the kind of main verbs that we have. Like we have verbs like jump, eat, sit, write, etc. They are different from all that because they give additional information about the function of the main verb that follows it, right? So that is what their job is, to give additional information. You cannot add S, or you cannot make the plural form of a modal auxiliary. You cannot make the past form of a modal auxiliary. It's not possible. And modal auxiliaries are always followed by a bare infinitive, or you can also call them the base form of the verb, right? So like for example, I will go home now. See, in this sentence, will is a modal auxiliary. It is always a helping verb. It cannot be used as a main verb. You cannot make a sentence using this modal will. It cannot be used as a main verb in any context in English. She can do this alone. Can is the modal auxiliary here. It might rain. Might is the modal auxiliary here, right? So modal auxiliaries are also called helping verbs, or they're also called modal verbs. They are helping verbs. And here, this is the bare infinitive. It is used to modify this. It shows you what is the function of this verb, right? So it's like it shows you what is the function or what is it trying to express. Now, when we talk about the functions of modals, or why do we use modals, we understand that modal verbs are used to express a lot of functions like permission, ability, obligation, prohibition, lack of necessity, advice, possibility, probability, strong belief, request, offer, etc. Like permission, can I go home? In that particular sentence, can is the modal auxiliary. Go is the main verb, right? May I take your book? That's also asking for permission. I can do this. I can do this means I am able to do this. So can is the modal auxiliary and do is the main verb there. You must respect your parents. You must. Must is a modal auxiliary that shows advice. Respect is the main verb there. It might rain or it may rain. It is probability, right? So it might rain in that particular sentence. Might is the modal auxiliary that shows probability. So these are the functions which modal verbs or modal auxiliaries express, and modal auxiliaries can never function as main verbs. Then we come to the 5 forms of the verb. Now, the verb has got 5 different forms, right? We have the base form of the verb or the infinitive. For example, you talk about write. Write is the base form of the verb. It is also called the bare infinitive. Now you have the S form or the ES form, which is the plural form, right? So, look at this. I write a letter. That is the base form. Write is the infinitive. Now you make derivations to this and you add S to it. So what happened? He writes a letter, right? So it is the S form. It shows the third person. Here it is the third person singular, right? He writes a letter. And then you have the ing form or the present participle. He is writing a letter. It is the ing form here. And you have the past form. He wrote a letter. The past tense of write is wrote. And you have the past participle form. It's also called the ed form. He has written a letter. So these are the 5 forms of any verb. I've just given the example of write. Now take another verb, for example. Suppose you take the verb sing. So the base form would be sing. The S form or the third person singular would be sings. But if it's plural, it will be again sing. He sings, they sing, right? Then you have the ing form. It's also called the present participle. So you have singing. Then you have the past form, sang. You have the past participle form, sung, right? Suppose you take another verb like play. So you have the base form, play. The S form, plays. The ing form, playing. The past form, played. The past participle form is also played, right? So we have 5 forms of the verb. And I was talking about the present participle, right? So, I was talking about the participle form. So we have 2 participle forms when it comes to verbs. The present participle, which is the ing form, and the past participle, which is the ed form. Now, present participles are mainly used to form continuous tense forms or also to act as adjectives. Now, look at this. This is an interesting story. In this particular sentence, interesting is an ing form, and here it is used as an adjective to define the noun story. Look at this. They are watching TV at the moment. This is a present continuous form. It shows something that is going on at the present moment. He has been working in the garden for 20 minutes. Has been working. This is again the present perfect continuous form. So these are the functions of the present participle. They are used to form continuous tense form or to act as adjectives. Then we come to the past participle. The past participle forms are used to form perfect tenses, right? And also to use or to form passive verb forms and sometimes to act as adjectives. I've given examples for all that. Look at this. Someone has eaten my pie. This is a perfect tense. This is the present perfect tense. The novel was written an year ago. So this is something that is in the passive voice, right? So, you can say, she wrote a novel an year ago. And I will ask you to convert that to the passive form. This is the active form. She wrote a novel an year ago. And suppose I ask you to change it into the passive form, you'll have to say the novel was written by her an year ago, right? So this past participle form is used to show the passive form, right? Then you have this next sentence where the past participle form is used as an adjective. The excited boys jumped up and down the room. See here, this ed form or the past participle form is used to modify the noun boys, right? So here we see that the past participle can be used as to form a perfect tense. It can be used to form a passive voice. It can also be used as an adjective. Now, we were talking about the past participle form. We have regular verbs and irregular verbs. So, regular verbs are those verbs which have the same past, simple past and also the past participle forms. And irregular verbs are those verbs wherein the past participle form is different from the past simple form, right? So, regular verbs and irregular verbs. To make it easier, you can say regular verbs are those verbs that take ed in the past tense and also in the past participle form. And irregular verbs are those verbs which have different past forms and different past participle forms. Look at this example. Study. Past tense is studied and past participle is also studied, right? Whereas when you look at this verb, the irregular verb swim, the past tense is swam and the past participle is swum. So we have difference. See, we have a difference here. Swam, swum. Here we have studied and studied. We have played and played. So we have the same past, simple past form and the same past participle form. Here we have the same, we don't have the same simple past form and the past participle form, both are different. So that is how we distinguish between regular verbs and irregular verbs. Now we have another concept in verbs called transitive and intransitive verbs. Now what are transitive verbs and what are intransitive verbs? As I have explained here, transitive verbs are those verbs that would require either one or more object. That is, the verb would have either one object or maybe more than one object, right? So how do you find out the object of a verb? So suppose you have a sentence. If you want to know that the sentence has an object, you need to ask these two questions. What or whom? Right? Look at this. I wrote a letter. The verb is wrote. So you ask the question, what or whom to the verb. I wrote what? The answer is a letter. So letter is the object of this verb. In this sentence, the teacher praised the student. Praised whom? The student. So the student is the object of this verb. So transitive verbs are those verbs which would have an object. It can be either one object or more than an object, right? But it is very necessary that a transitive verb should have an object. If the verb does not have an object, it's called an intransitive verb. And you find out whether a verb has an object by asking the question what or whom to this verb, right? Suppose a verb has two objects. There will be one direct object and the other would be the indirect object. So, I gifted my mother a necklace. So, you ask the question, I gifted what? A necklace. I gifted whom? My mother. So, you're getting answer to both the questions. If you get an answer to the question what, that answer is the direct object. And if you get an answer to the question whom, that answer is the indirect object. So, in this sentence, I gifted my mother a necklace. I gifted what? A necklace. So, a necklace is the direct object. I gifted whom? My mother. So, my mother is the indirect object. So, we see these verbs are transitive verbs because they have an object, right? And what are intransitive verbs? Intransitive verbs are verbs which do not have an object. They do not require an object to act upon. For example, the apple fell from the tree. The apple fell from the tree. Fell is the verb here. So you ask the question, fell what? Fell what? Not what fell. Fell what? No answer. Fell whom? No answer. So there's no object to this verb. I went to Delhi last week. Went what? No answer. Went whom? No answer. That means these verbs do not have an object and they are called intransitive verbs. So to sum up, transitive verbs are those verbs which do have an object to act upon, and intransitive verbs are those verbs which do not require an object to act upon. We will look at another aspect of the verb which is called the phrasal verb. What do you mean by a phrasal verb? A phrasal verb by definition is a combination of a verb and a particle. Now this particle can either be an article or it can also be a preposition. And when this verb and the particle are used together, they take on a different meaning than that of the original words, right? So the particle can be either placed after the verb or after the object. So what do you mean by a phrasal verb? A phrasal verb is a combination of a verb and a particle and it gives a different meaning when compared to the meaning of the two original words, right? Look at this example. Selma called on her friend this morning. Now call on is a phrasal verb. Now, call on means she visited her friend, right? So, it takes on a different meaning altogether. We put off our vacation until next year. So, put off is postpone, right? So, like we have postponed our vacation. Now, put off is a phrasal verb. It is a combination of the verb put and the preposition off. But if the object is a pronoun, the particle has to be placed after the pronoun. Look at this sentence. Chris gave it back. What is the object of the verb in this particular sentence? As I taught you earlier, you ask the question, what or who? Chris gave what? The answer is it, and it is a pronoun. So when the object is a pronoun, the particle has to be placed after the pronoun. So Chris gave it back. We don't say Chris gave back it, we say Chris gave it back. Gave back is return. Shyam called her up yesterday. Here also the object of the verb call is her. Called whom? Her, right? Her is a pronoun. So the particle would be placed after the pronoun. Shyam called her up yesterday. Call up somebody means to ring up somebody, to contact that person by phone, right? So I have given a few examples of phrasal verbs. Look at this. Ask around. Ask around means ask many people the same question. The sentence that I've given here is Pravin asked around if anyone had seen his brown bag. That is asking many people the same question. Break-in is not breaking something. It is forcefully entering into a building. So we would say a thief broke into his house yesterday, right? Chip in. Chip in is help. So if everyone chips in, the work will be finished on time. Drop out. Drop out is leave a college or leave a program of a college or leave a school program in between. So you say somebody dropped out of college because he was finding it difficult to meet his financial needs. Get along or get on. It is like each other. We'll say the two friends got along very well. That means they liked each other so much. Hold back. Hold back means hiding an emotion. You can say she held back her tears when she came to know that she had failed for her math examination. Holding back is hiding an emotion. Makeup is not something that you put on your face. It is forgiving each other. Like the example that I have given here, to the relief of their parents, the two brothers made up after their bitter quarrel, forgiving each other. Run out means having nothing left. So we ran out of sugar on the final day of the camp. That means the sugar that was there got over. So run out is having nothing left. Take after means resembling a family member. Sheena takes after her father. Both of them have curly hair. Sheena resembles her father. So this is what you mean by phrasal verbs, the combination of a verb and a particle, and the meaning that is conveyed is quite different from the meaning of the original words, right? So today we have learned something about the verb, right? We have learned about the 5 forms of the verb. We have learned about auxiliary verbs. We have learned about main verbs. We have learned about primary auxiliaries. We've learned about modals, present participle, past participle, transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, and we've also looked at phrasal verbs. And I hope by this time you've got some idea about what the verb is. Thank you very much.